somewhere between presence and distance, a different kind of love learns how to breathe, one that never demands, never claims, and never fears letting go. Radha does not follow Krishna to keep him, and Krishna never stays to possess her, and in that space between them, love remains untouched. If this story has touched something quiet within you, let it be an offering, not a belief. In the spirit of Bhakti, love is not something to claim, but something to honor. If you feel called to support this space, you may do so gently by liking, subscribing, or simply returning another night. Radha and Krishna do not enter this world as a beginning, but as a continuation. The land already knows them. The paths are worn smooth by feet that have walked them before. The fields are divided and tended. Cattle move slowly through dust that rises and settles again without urgency. In Braj, life unfolds with a steady rhythm shaped by seasons rather than in events, and within that rhythm, their closeness feels neither secret nor declared. It is simply present, like the sound of breathing at rest. Krishna moves easily among people, not set apart by ceremony or authority, but by attentiveness. He listens more than he speaks, watches more than he acts, and when he moves, others adjust unconsciously, as though responding to a change in light rather than to a command. In early pastoral societies of northern India, such figures were not uncommon. Young men whose roles blended labor, music, and mediation within the community. Archaeological evidence from agrarian settlements in this region shows continuity of cattle herding, dairy production, and seasonal migration stretching back centuries, grounding the setting in lived human patterns rather than mythic abstraction. Radha's presence does not announce itself. She is already there, woven into the social fabric. Her movements aligned with the same daily tasks as others, yet carrying a stillness that does not withdraw, but deepens attention. She does not step forward to be seen. Instead, the space around her subtly changes. In later devotional language, she will be described as central. But here, she is not central because she claims it. She is central because others orbit naturally. Without noticing, they are doing so. Their bond forms not through declaration, but through alignment. When Krishna pauses, Radha does not follow. When Radha remains, Krishna does not ask her to come. This absence of pursuit is not indifference, but trust, a mutual recognition that closeness does not require compression. In societies governed by kinship, marriage, and lineage, such restraint would later appear unusual, even disruptive. But within this lived moment, it feels neither rebellious nor incomplete. It simply is. The emotional tone of their connection is quiet joy, unguarded but not grasping, shared glances, unspoken understanding, the ease of moving within the same space without needing to fill it. Historians studying early Bhakti sentiment often point to such depictions as a response to social structures where duty dominated emotion. Here, however, duty and emotion do not compete. They coexist, each aware of the other's boundaries. Time passes without being measured. Morning light becomes afternoon warmth, then softens into evening air. In agrarian cultures, time is experienced through repetition rather than progression, and this shapes how love is felt. There is no urgency to define, secure, or conclude. Love unfolds as a state rather than a narrative, sustained by continuity rather than climax. Krishna's music, when it appears, does not summon. It drifts, The flute's sound carries across open fields, shaped by wind and distance, losing sharpness as it travels. In oral cultures, music often functioned as shared memory rather than performance, binding people through recognition rather than attention. Here, the sound does not belong to Krishna alone. It belongs to the space between him and those who hear it, especially Radha, who receives it without moving toward its source. What binds them most strongly is what they do not do. They do not promise permanence. They do not attempt to stop time. They do not mistake closeness for ownership. This restraint gives their connection a calm durability, allowing it to breathe rather than tighten. In later centuries, poets will struggle to capture this quality, often intensifying emotion to make it visible. But at its core, the bond remains defined by what it refuses to claim. The world around them continues uninterrupted. Work is done, animals are tended, meals are shared, conversations rise and fade. Nothing in the landscape signals that something extraordinary is taking place, and that is precisely the point. Love, here, is not an interruption of life, but a way of inhabiting it more gently. As evening approaches, the air cools and movement slows. The closeness remains, unmarked by conclusion, unshaped by expectation. It settles into the background, steady and patient, preparing the ground for change that has not yet arrived, but will, inevitably, widen the space between them without breaking what already exists. Morning returns without ceremony, spreading across Braj in a way that feels practiced rather than new. Light does not arrive suddenly here. It unfolds, touching the edges of fields first, then settling on paths, cattle, and low dwellings built to endure heat, rain, and long familiarity. This landscape has learned patience. Archaeological surveys across the Mathura Vrindavan region reveal layers of continuous rural habitation, suggesting that generations lived and worked within the same boundaries, adjusting slowly rather than abandoning what already sustained them. Radha moves through this space as part of its rhythm, not apart from it. The tasks of the day are shared, unremarkable, shaped by seasonal knowledge, passed down without written instruction. Grain is measured, milk is drawn, animals are guided rather than driven. Such labor leaves little room for spectacle, but it cultivates attentiveness. In early agrarian societies, survival depended on reading subtle signs, changes in soil, shifts in weather, the health of animals, and this sensitivity extends naturally into human relationships. Krishna appears among the cowherds with the same ease. He does not arrive. He is already present, adjusting his pace to match others, stepping into conversation and silence with equal comfort. Historical reconstructions of pastoral communities in northern India suggest that social cohesion relied less on hierarchy than on cooperation, especially among young men tasked with shared responsibility. Krishna's role fits within this pattern, not as leader or outsider, but as someone whose awareness steadies group movement. The fields themselves hold memory. River-fed soil supports grazing land that has sustained cattle herding for centuries, and the gentle undulation of the terrain encourages wandering rather than confinement. This openness shapes how people relate to one another. There are few walls, fewer boundaries that insist on separation. Space allows proximity without pressure, a condition that quietly supports the kind of bond Radha and Krishna inhabit. Their closeness is visible not through gesture, but through orientation. They stand within the same currents of activity, aware of each other without signaling. When work draws Krishna farther across the fields, Radha does not watch him go. When Radha remains near the village, Krishna does not look back. Their trust in continuity removes the need for reassurance. In later devotional interpretation, this will be described as spiritual confidence, but here it is simply lived. Sound carries differently in open land. Voices disperse, footsteps soften, and music, when it emerges, becomes part of the environment rather than a focal point. The flute's notes stretch and thin as they travel, shaped by wind and distance. Ethnomusicologists studying rural traditions note that such instruments were often used less for performance than for marking time and presence, allowing individuals to locate one another without demanding attention. In this way, music becomes a connective tissue rather than a call. Radha hears without responding, and this non-response is not absence. It is acknowledgement without obligation. She continues what she is doing, allowing the sound to pass through her awareness rather than pulling her toward its source. This restraint deepens rather than weakens connection, reinforcing a mutual understanding that neither needs to be summoned to remain close. The community moves together as the day unfolds. Meals are prepared and shared, not as formal gatherings, but as pauses within labor. Children move freely between adults. Animals shift positions. Conversation flows and recedes. Nothing isolates Radha and Krishna from this life, and they do not isolate themselves. Their bond does not remove them from the world. It anchors them more firmly within it. Time, in this setting, is cyclical. Seasons return, tasks repeat, and understanding accumulates slowly. Historians observing early rural settlements emphasize how such cycles fostered continuity over ambition. There is little incentive to rush, to conclude, to secure outcomes prematurely. This temporal structure allows relationships to remain open-ended without anxiety, supported by the expectation that what matters will return in its own time. As the sun reaches its height, movement slows and shadows shorten. The closeness between Radha and Krishna remains unspoken, sustained by shared orientation rather than interaction. It does not require confirmation because it has already settled into the texture of daily life, as ordinary and as essential as the land itself. Krishna is known first by how he moves, not quickly, not with urgency, but with an attentiveness that allows him to adjust to others without effort. Among the cowherds, this quality matters more than authority. Pastoral communities depend on shared awareness rather than command, and archaeological reconstructions of early cattle herding societies across northern India suggest that cohesion emerged through observation, memory, and mutual correction, not through fixed hierarchy. Krishna fits this pattern naturally, not as an exception, but as a refinement of it. He works alongside others, hands familiar with rope and staff, eyes trained to read the behavior of animals before it becomes a problem. Cattle shift mood with weather and sound, and those who tend them learn patience early. This patience settles into Krishna's presence. When the herd slows, he slows. When it spreads, he allows it to widen without forcing it back into line. Such restraint, later interpreted symbolically, begins here as skill shaped by environment. Within the group, his influence is subtle. Others notice when he pauses, when he listens, when he redirects attention without instruction. In oral societies, Memory attaches itself to such figures, not because they dominate events, but because they stabilize them. Long before Krishna becomes a philosophical voice in texts, he exists as a remembered presence whose calm allows others to remain calm themselves. Radha remains within this same field of movement, neither following nor withdrawing. She does not watch Krishna as one watches something rare. She notices him as one notices weather, aware without fixation. Their shared space does not narrow into a private corridor. It remains open, allowing others to pass through without disruption. This openness protects the bond from scrutiny and from the need to define itself. The relationship unfolds through alignment rather than exchange. They respond to the same rhythms, pause at the same moments, resume without signaling. In societies structured by visible roles and expectations, such quiet synchronization can go unnoticed, yet it forms the most durable connections. Historians studying communal labor often note that trust develops less through declaration than through repeated, unremarkable cooperation. Radha and Krishna inhabit this truth without naming it. When Krishna's flute appears, it does so without preparation. The instrument is simple, fashioned from what is available, reflecting a broader material culture where tools were made to be replaced rather than preserved. Sound emerges not as performance, but as byproduct, filling space without seeking attention. The notes do not announce emotion, they create room for it. Radha hears the music as part of the day's texture. She does not move toward it. And this stillness is not restraint imposed from outside, but balance maintained from within. In later devotional frameworks, this will be understood as spiritual maturity, the ability to remain present without grasping. Here, it functions as emotional literacy, shaped by environment and habit. As the day progresses, tasks change, but orientation remains. The herd returns gradually, dust rising and settling again. The air carries warmth, then releases it. People gather not because they are summoned, but because proximity makes gathering natural. Krishna does not separate himself from this movement. He remains within it, neither center nor edge, allowing attention to circulate freely. This circulation of attention becomes a defining feature of his presence. In later textual traditions, Krishna will be described as attracting all things toward himself. But in lived experience, his influence works differently. He allows attention to move, to rest, to drift away without resistance. This generosity of space fosters trust, making closeness sustainable rather than consuming. Radha's awareness mirrors this quality. She does not claim emotional ground, does not test boundaries. Her steadiness becomes the quiet axis around which motion occurs. In later centuries, poets will intensify her longing to render it visible. But beneath those embellishments lies a core of composure, a refusal to confuse love with urgency. The community responds unconsciously to this equilibrium. Conversations soften, movement slows slightly, conflicts dissolve before forming. Anthropological studies of small-scale societies note how emotional regulation often emerges from shared norms rather than explicit rules. Radha and Krishna embody such regulation, modeling it without instruction. As evening approaches, the quality of light shifts, and with it, the day's energy settles. The closeness between them remains intact, unchanged by fatigue or expectation. It does not demand culmination. It accepts the day's end as continuation rather than conclusion. This acceptance prepares the ground for change that will soon arrive. Movement will widen, responsibilities will expand, and distance will begin to enter their shared space. Yet nothing in this moment resists what is coming. The bond has been shaped to endure not by tightening, but by allowing space to exist without threat. The herd settles, voices quiet, and the air cools. Krishna remains among others, Radha remains herself, and between them, the calm persists, steady enough to carry what lies ahead without needing to be protected from it. Radha is part of the day before she is part of any story. She wakes, moves, works, and rests within the same rhythm as everyone around her, without drawing attention to herself and without trying to shape how others see her. In a rural society like Braj, where life depends on steady repetition rather than moments of display, such quiet consistency carries real weight. The work of the day unfolds without pause. Food is prepared, animals are tended, conversations rise and fall as needed. Archaeological studies of agrarian settlements in this region suggest communities structured around shared labor and long familiarity, where trust formed slowly through reliability rather than assertion. Radha fits naturally into this pattern. Nothing about her behavior sets her apart. Yet, her presence seems to make the work feel lighter, more coordinated. People do not speak about her importance, but they adjust to her without thinking. Tasks finish on time. Small tensions ease before they become disputes. Anthropologists often note that in small communities, emotional balance is maintained by individuals who regulate the group simply by remaining calm and attentive. Radha plays this role without instruction or recognition. Her closeness with Krishna develops within this ordinary setting. There is no moment when it begins, and no clear line separating it from the rest of life. They share space rather than attention, moving within the same rhythm without trying to claim one another. When Krishna goes farther into the fields, Radha does not follow. When Radha remains near the village, Krishna does not ask her to come. Their trust removes the need for reassurance. This absence of pursuit does not weaken the bond, it strengthens it. In a society shaped by kinship and obligation, relationships often relied on duty to hold them together. Here, the connection rests on understanding instead. Neither feels the need to test the other's commitment, because the bond was never built on control. Radha's emotional life is quiet but full. She feels deeply, but she does not search for ways to display it. Her attention stays wide, open to work, to people, to the subtle changes of the day. This openness keeps the relationship balanced. Love that closes in on itself becomes fragile. Love that remains part of daily life can last. When Krishna's flute is heard across the fields, Radha notices it without stopping what she is doing. The sound does not interrupt her. It settles into her awareness. In rural cultures shaped by oral tradition, music often served to mark presence rather than to call people together. Radha understands this instinctively. Hearing is enough. Movement is not required. Her response remains internal. The connection deepens without outward sign, without altering her place in the world. Later, devotional thinkers will describe this as inward devotion. But here, it exists simply as habit, shaped by environment and repetition rather than belief. The community continues around them without disruption. Children move between adults, animals shift, labor slows and resumes. Radha does not withdraw from this life, and Krishna does not draw her away from it. Their bond does not remove them from the world. It anchors them within it. As the day moves toward evening, energy fades slightly and attention loosens. Radha remains steady, not because she resists change, but because she accepts it. This acceptance creates room for others to slow down as well, easing the transition from work to rest. Historians caution against projecting modern ideas of romance onto the past. For many pre-modern communities, endurance mattered more than intensity. Radha's composure reflects this reality, yet it also points towards something deeper, a way of loving that does not depend on certainty or outcome. Her relationship with Krishna is strong because it does not consume her life. It exists alongside everything else, drawing strength from that balance. Distance has not fully entered yet, but the bond is already prepared for it, built to hold space rather than collapse under it. When Krishna's responsibilities take him farther from the center of village life, Radha remains where she is, without anxiety. Closeness is not measured by how often they meet, but by how naturally they remain aligned, even when apart. As evening arrives and voices lower, Radha stays within the circle of community, her presence unchanged. Nothing needs to be decided or secured. The bond continues quietly, ready to carry forward as the space between them slowly, naturally begins to widen. The sound of the flute is not meant to stop the day. It moves through the fields the same way air does, lightly and without direction, sometimes clear, sometimes barely there. People hear it while they work, while they walk, while they pause, and most of the time, they do not turn toward it. The sound is part of the place, not an event inside it. In rural communities shaped by open land and shared labor, sound often works this way. It helps people sense where others are, without asking them to gather or respond. A flute, especially, carries far without pressing itself forward. It does not demand. Krishna's flute is simple. It is made to be used, not admired. It fits easily into his daily life, rising when his breath and movement happen to line up, falling silent when they do not. He does not play to be noticed. The sound comes and goes without plan. Shaped, Radha hears it as she hears everything else around her. She notices it, then lets it pass. She does not stop what she is doing. She does not move closer. This is not because the sound means little to her, but because it means enough already. She does not need to answer it to feel connected. In places where sound is always present, animals, voices, wind, people learn to listen without reacting. Hearing does not always lead to movement. Radha understands this without thinking about it. The flute reaches her, settles briefly, and fades, leaving her where she is. This quiet way of listening keeps the bond between her and Krishna steady. It does not tighten it. It does not pull it inward. The sound allows closeness to exist across space, without asking that space be closed. Nothing is summoned. Nothing is withheld. Others hear the flute too. Some notice it more than others. Some barely register it at all. No one treats it as special. This matters. When music becomes ordinary, it can stay gentle. It does not turn into a signal or a claim. It remains shared. Historians who study early oral cultures often point out that memory worked through familiarity, not precision. Sounds were not meant to be repeated the same way twice. They were meant to return often enough to feel known. The flute follows this pattern. Its notes are not fixed. They change with each breath. Radha does not try to hold on to what she hears. She does not wait for the sound to come back. She does not mark its absence as loss. It has already done its work by passing through. Her awareness stays open, not attached to any single moment. Krishna does not watch to see who is listening. He does not play longer to keep attention. The music is not a message. It is a presence. Because of this, it does not pull people toward him. It lets them remain where they are. Silence matters just as much as sound. The flute does not fill the air all the time. It leaves space behind when it stops. That space is not empty. It allows the day to continue without interruption. In this balance between sound and silence, nothing feels urgent. Radha senses this balance clearly. She does not feel called when the flute is heard, and she does not feel abandoned when it stops. The sound is part of the day, not a test of closeness. Her calm response keeps the relationship from turning inward on itself. The work around her continues. Children move between adults. Animals shift their weight and settle again. Conversation rises and fades. The flute becomes one sound among many, not separate from life, not placed above it. As the day goes on, the flute appears again, then disappears. Each time, it feels natural, neither expected nor surprising. This steadiness keeps emotion from becoming restless. It allows connection to stay quiet and durable. Later poetry will turn these moments into symbols, drawing attention to sound as invitation and longing. But here, the music remains simple. It does not ask Radha to move. It allows her to stay. This becomes important as distance slowly begins to grow. Sound can travel where bodies cannot. It keeps orientation without closing space. The flute teaches the bond how to remain present without drawing closer. As evening approaches, the music fades on its own. The air cools. Movement slows. Nothing feels unfinished. The sound has come and gone without changing the shape of the day. Radha remains where she is, steady and at ease. Krishna remains among others, unmarked by attention. Between them, the connection holds, shaped not by calling and answering, but by the shared understanding that closeness does not need to be chased. In that understanding, the bond stays calm, ready to continue as time moves forward, and space slowly, gently opens wider between them. Joy does not arrive loudly here. It shows up in small, ordinary moments that do not ask to be noticed. A shared glance that lasts only a second. A quiet smile that fades before it can be explained. Nothing tries to stay longer than it should. Radha and Krishna share this kind of joy. It is calm and steady. It does not depend on promises or plans. It grows from being in the same place, moving through the same day, doing simple things without needing to talk about them. In a life shaped by routine and work, this kind of happiness feels natural. Sometimes they are close to each other. Sometimes they are not. Neither situation changes what they feel. Joy does not grow stronger when distance closes, and it does not disappear when space opens. Because of this, it never becomes fragile. Many people try to hold on to happiness when it appears. They worry it will not return. Here, no one does that. Joy comes, does what it needs to do, and leaves. Letting it go is not careless. It is a way of keeping it light. Radha understands this without effort. When a moment feels good, she lets it be good. She does not try to turn it into something more. She does not ask what it means or what comes next. Her attention stays with what is happening now. That keeps her at ease. Krishna responds the same way. He does not try to repeat past moments. He does not compare today with yesterday. Each day is allowed to stand on its own. This keeps joy from turning into expectation, and expectation from turning into disappointment. The people around them live this way too. Work is done. Conversations begin and end. Laughter appears briefly and fades. No one treats happiness as rare. No one builds their life around chasing it. Because of that, it returns often. Historians who study early rural life often note that calm mattered more than excitement. Too much intensity disrupted daily work and balance. Quiet happiness helped people endure long days and changing seasons. The joy Radha and Krishna share belongs to this calm kind. It supports life instead of interrupting it. Their bond stays strong because joy is not used to measure it. Happiness does not become proof of closeness. It does not need constant presence. Because of this, it never feels heavy. It remains gentle and easy to carry. Radha's joy does not pull her away from others. She keeps working, listening, and responding. Krishna's joy does not separate him either. He stays among people, attentive and relaxed. Their happiness does not isolate them. It helps them stay connected to the world around them. As the day moves forward, small moments of ease continue to appear. A task finishes smoothly. A conversation ends without tension. These moments matter, even though no one points them out. They show how joy can exist without needing attention. Neither Radha nor Krishna tries to make these moments last. When they pass, they pass. Nothing is lost because nothing was held too tightly. This makes joy easier to welcome the next time it comes. Without knowing it, they are preparing for change. Joy that depends on control struggles when life shifts. Joy that knows how to pass can survive distance and movement. This kind of happiness teaches the bond how to remain steady, even when moments do not repeat. As afternoon settles in, the pace slows. Work continues, but with less urgency. The feeling of ease remains, not as excitement, but as quiet balance. Nothing needs to be said about it. Radha stays calm. Krishna stays attentive. Joy lingers briefly, then moves on, leaving behind a softness that does not ask for more. And in that softness, the bond continues, unforced, unstrained, and ready to move forward without fear, because it has never depended on holding joy still. Evening brings people together without planning it. Work slows, bodies grow tired, and movement naturally gathers closer to home. No one calls for this moment. It arrives on its own, the way dusk always does, softening edges and lowering voices. In Braj, evenings are shared. People sit nearby, finish small tasks, talk without urgency, or stay quiet together. This kind of gathering was common in early rural communities where daylight set the pace of life and night encouraged closeness. Archaeological studies of village settlements suggest that evenings were less about activity and more about presence, being near one another after a long day. Radha is part of this. Without stepping forward, she sits where others sit, listens when others speak, and remains quiet when silence feels right. There is no sense that she is waiting for anything. The day has already been full enough. Krishna is there too, among the group, not apart from it. He does not draw attention to himself. He does not place himself at the center. He adjusts to the mood around him, letting it guide how much he speaks, how much he stays still. This awareness keeps the gathering calm. Music sometimes appears in the evening, sometimes not. When it does, it is simple, a few notes, a familiar rhythm, nothing meant to impress. In oral cultures, shared sound often helped people settle after work, not excite them. It marked the shift from effort to rest. Radha hears and listens without leaning forward. Krishna plays and stops without concern. The sound belongs to everyone, not to the space between them alone. This shared quality keeps their bond from becoming private in a way that would separate them from others. The dance that later traditions will describe begins here as movement, not performance. People shift positions, step closer or farther apart, adjust to one another naturally. There is no pattern that must be followed. The body moves the way it needs to after a long day. Historians note that early communal dances were often informal, shaped by repetition rather than choreography. Radha moves when movement feels right. She stops when it does not. Krishna does the same. They do not seek each other out, and they do not avoid each other. Their awareness remains open, allowing space for others to move between them without tension. This openness matters. It keeps closeness from becoming a boundary. Love that closes in too tightly can make others feel excluded. Here, nothing closes. The gathering remains whole. Conversation fades in and out. Laughter appears briefly. Silence returns without discomfort. These shifts happen naturally, guided by shared fatigue rather than by design. No one feels the need to hold the moment in place. Radha's presence remains steady. She does not use the gathering to define her connection with Krishna. She allows it to exist without display. Krishna mirrors this ease. He does not try to shape the evening into something meaningful. He lets it pass as it is. As night deepens, people begin to drift away. Some leave early, some stay a little longer. There is no clear ending. This lack of closure feels right. It reflects how the day itself has unfolded, without sharp edges. The bond between Radha and Krishna continues within this shared space, unmarked by gesture or promise. It does not need the gathering to confirm it. It does not weaken when people leave. When the last sounds fade and movement slows, what remains is quiet, familiar, and unforced. Nothing has been decided. Nothing has been lost. And in that simple ending, the closeness holds, unchanged by the gathering, strengthened by being part of it, ready to continue as the night settles and the world grows still again. Distance does not arrive all at once. It enters slowly, almost politely, the way small changes do when no one is watching for them. Krishna begins to spend more time away from the center of village life. Responsibilities pull him outward, toward the fields, toward neighboring settlements, toward concerns that do not belong to one place alone. This kind of movement was common in early rural societies. Young men often carried tasks that required travel, trade, or coordination beyond the village, especially in regions connected by grazing routes and seasonal exchange. Nothing about this is unusual. Radha notices the change without reacting to it. She does not ask why he is gone more often. She does not wait for explanations. The day still needs to be lived, and she continues to live it. Distance, at this stage, does not feel like loss. It feels like space opening naturally. The way fields widen beyond a path. They see each other less, but when they do, nothing needs to be adjusted. There is no need to catch up, no urgency to fill silence. Their closeness does not depend on how often they meet. It depends on how easily they remain aligned when they do. This is the first quiet distance. It does not carry drama or fear. It does not ask to be resisted. It simply exists. In many stories, separation arrives as conflict or crisis. Here, it arrives as part of life's movement, shaped by responsibility rather than choice. Radha's response remains steady. She does not measure the bond by absence. She does not replay moments that have passed. Her attention stays with the present. What needs to be done? Who is nearby? How the day unfolds. This way of staying grounded prevents distance from turning into anxiety. Krishna carries the same calm with him. Wherever he goes, he does not feel pulled back by what he has left behind. He does not worry that space will weaken what already exists. This trust allows him to move freely without feeling divided. In early communities, emotional balance mattered. Too much longing could disrupt work, relationships, and focus. People learned to live with absence because absence was part of life. Through travel, seasonal work, illness, and change, the first distance between Radha and Krishna fits into this larger human pattern. Sound still travels where bodies cannot. Sometimes Radha hears the flute from far away, faint and uncertain. Sometimes she does not hear it at all. Neither situation changes her sense of connection. Hearing is not required. Silence is not a sign. The village continues as it always has. People work, gather, rest, and repeat. Nothing stops because one person is away more often. This continuity keeps distance from feeling like disruption. Life absorbs it without strain. When Radha and Krishna do cross paths, their ease remains. There is no relief, no tension, no sense of reunion. They meet as they always have, within the same calm awareness. Distance has not added weight to the moment. It has simply widened the space around it. This widening begins to teach something important. Closeness does not shrink when space grows. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, less visible, but no less real. In some ways, it becomes stronger because it no longer depends on habit. Radha does not try to close the distance. She does not step beyond her own rhythm to reach him. Krishna does not rush back to reduce the space. Neither sees distance as a problem to solve. This shared understanding keeps the bond from turning into effort. Historians who study early devotional life often note that spiritual meaning grew out of ordinary experience. Before ideas were written down, they were lived. The quiet distance between Radha and Krishna becomes one of those lived lessons, showing how connection can remain without constant presence. As days pass, the space becomes familiar. It no longer feels new. It becomes part of the rhythm, like changing weather or shifting light. Familiarity removes fear. Distance, once known, loses its power to disturb. Radha's days remain full. She does not leave room for waiting. Krishna's path continues to widen. He moves where he is needed, without feeling torn. Their lives continue forward, not away from each other, but alongside one another on parallel lines. This is not the distance of ending. It is the distance of beginning. It prepares both of them for greater movement ahead, for separation that will deepen without breaking what has already been shaped. As evening returns, Radha sits among others, as she always has. Krishna is elsewhere, doing what the day has asked of him. The space between them holds steady, neither empty nor tense, and in that space, something new is learned quietly. That love does not fade when it is not touched, and that closeness does not disappear just because it has learned how to stretch. The first quiet distance settles into place, not as a wound, but as a widening horizon, one that the bond can already cross without moving at all. Longing does not arrive suddenly. It grows slowly, the way habits do, settling into the day without announcing itself. At first, nothing feels missing. Life continues as before. Work is done. Evenings come and go, but the space that has opened begins to carry a quiet weight. Radha does not wake up thinking of absence. She wakes up thinking of the day ahead. There is work to do, people to meet, small choices to make. Yet somewhere beneath these routines, a new awareness has taken root. The distance that once felt neutral now asks to be carried. This is not longing filled with pain. It is closer to attention that has nowhere to rest. Krishna is not gone from her thoughts, but he is not fixed there either. He moves in and out of awareness the way the sound of wind does, present, then fading, then present again. Longing here is not sharp, it is steady. In early rural life, people were familiar with this feeling. Travel, seasonal work, and responsibility often took loved ones away for long periods. Longing became part of daily life, not something that stopped it. People learned to carry it quietly while continuing what needed to be done. Radha carries longing the same way. She does not speak about it. She does not search for ways to ease it. She allows it to exist alongside everything else. This acceptance keeps it from growing heavy. Longing that is resisted tightens. Longing that is allowed stays light enough to live with. Her days remain full. She listens, works, rests, and moves with others. Longing does not pull her inward. It does not isolate her. It stays open, connected to the world, rather than turned against it. Krishna carries longing too. Though his path keeps him moving, he feels the distance, but he does not try to close it. Responsibility requires attention, and he gives it. Longing becomes part of that attention, not a distraction from it. This shared way of carrying absence matters. Neither of them treats longing as a problem to be solved. It is not something to fix or escape. It is simply part of the shape life has taken. This understanding keeps the bond steady, even as space continues to grow. Historians studying early devotional traditions often note that longing became a teacher. Before it was named or explained, it was lived. People learned what it meant to care deeply without needing to act on that care. Longing shaped patience, restraint, and trust. Radha's longing does not demand signs. She does not look for proof that the bond remains. She does not count days or mark time. She trusts what has already been shaped. This trust allows longing to deepen without turning into fear. Sound still travels at times. A distant flute may be heard, faint and unsure. Sometimes it is not heard at all. Neither confirms nor denies anything. Longing does not depend on reminders. It exists whether sound comes or not. The village continues its rhythm. Children grow. Seasons shift. Fields change color. Nothing pauses for what is felt quietly inside one person. This continuity helps longing stay grounded. It remains part of life, not an interruption of it. When Radha and Krishna do meet, the longing does not rush forward. It does not demand release. Their ease remains. Longing does not disappear in closeness, nor does it grow in distance. It has found its place. This kind of longing is different from desire that seeks fulfillment. It does not look for an ending. It does not expect resolution. It is content to exist without knowing where it leads. In later centuries, Poets will describe longing as fire, as storm, as suffering. Those images will give voice to what is hard to explain. But beneath those words lies a simpler truth. Longing can be quiet. It can be lived without breaking the one who carries it. Radha shows this quietly. She does not turn longing into sorrow. She lets it soften her attention rather than harden it. Krishna carries the same softness as he moves outward into wider responsibilities. Together, without speaking, they learn that longing does not weaken love. It changes it, it stretches it, it gives it depth without demanding possession. As days continue, longing settles into the background of Radha's life. It is there, but it does not control her. It becomes part of how she understands closeness, something that can exist even when nothing is touched. And in that understanding, the bond grows calmer, deeper, and more patient, ready to meet the next widening of space without fear, because longing itself has learned how to live quietly within the day. Krishna's leaving does not happen in one clear moment. There is no farewell that sets it apart from other days. He begins to spend longer periods away, moving farther from Braj, drawn by duties that do not belong to one village or one group of people. Life asks more of him, and he responds without resistance. In early societies, this kind of movement was expected. Young men were often pulled outward by trade, protection, negotiation, or service to wider communities. Leaving was not always permanent, but it was rarely brief. It did not need to be explained. Responsibility carried its own logic. Radha understands this. She does not ask him to stay. She does not ask him to return sooner. There is no moment where she weighs his duty against her own feeling. She knows that holding him back would change what already exists between them. Love that demands presence becomes heavy. She does not want that. When Krishna goes, Radha stays, not because she is left behind, but because her place remains where it has always been. She continues her life without rearranging it around his absence. Work still needs to be done. People still need attention. The day still moves forward. This stillness is not passive. It takes strength to remain where one is without turning waiting into purpose. Radha does not wait. She lives. Her steadiness keeps the bond from turning into something fragile or strained. Krishna carries the same understanding with him. He does not feel as though he is abandoning anything. He does not feel torn. The bond does not pull him backward. It moves with him quietly, without asking to be acknowledged at every step. Distance widens now in a more noticeable way. Days pass without crossing paths. News travels slowly. Sometimes Radha hears where Krishna has gone. Sometimes she does not. The lack of information does not disturb her. What they share does not depend on updates. Historians note that in pre-modern life, absence was common and often long. People learned to trust relationships without constant contact. Letters were rare. Messages were uncertain. Connection relied on memory and confidence rather than proof. Radha's response fits this world naturally. Her longing remains, but it does not rule her days. It sits beside her work, her conversations, her rest. It does not pull her out of the present. She does not imagine scenes of return or reunion. She lets what will happen arrive in its own time. Krishna's path continues outward. Each place he visits adds weight to his responsibility. He is needed in ways that go beyond personal closeness. This expansion does not erase what he carries from Braj. It deepens it. The bond becomes quieter, less visible, but more settled. This is where their love takes on a different shape. It is no longer formed by shared space or daily rhythm. It is formed by trust. Trust that what exists does not need guarding. Trust that distance does not undo what was built without possession. Radha does not speak of this love as sacrifice. She does not frame it as loss. It does not feel like something taken from her. It feels like something allowed to move. This way of loving leaves room for the other to grow. Krishna does not think of her as something he has left behind. She remains part of his awareness, not as an ache, but as orientation. She is not a memory pulling him backward. She is a steadiness that allows him to move forward without becoming divided. The village adjusts to his absence without disruption. Life absorbs change the way it always has. This absorption matters. It keeps love from turning dramatic. It keeps absence from becoming a wound. Radha's days remain full. She laughs when there is reason to laugh. She grows tired when the day is long. Nothing about her life freezes. The bond does not ask her to stop living. This is not the end of closeness. It is the beginning of a deeper distance, one that tests whether love can exist without being acted on. Radha and Krishna do not discuss this test. They live it. As time continues, the space between them becomes part of the landscape of their lives. It no longer feels temporary or alarming. It feels real and accepted. And in that acceptance, something settles quietly into place. The understanding that love does not need to stay in one location to remain whole, and that letting go of presence is not the same as letting go of connection. Krishna moves on. Radha remains. Neither feels reduced by this. The bond holds, not by effort, but by trust, carrying them forward into what comes next without fear. Life does not rush to fill what has changed. After Krishna's leaving becomes familiar, the days settle into a new shape. Nothing feels broken. Nothing asks to be repaired. The bond does not fade, but it also does not push itself forward, asking to be seen or explained. Radha lives within this quiet balance. She wakes, works, rests, and moves through the day without marking time by what is missing. There is no sense that something must be completed. Her life is not paused. It continues, steady and full. The absence of reunion is not painful, because reunion was never promised. From the beginning, their closeness did not depend on endings or conclusions. It did not aim toward a moment when everything would come together and stop changing. Because of this, the lack of resolution does not feel like loss. Many stories depend on reunion to feel complete. They build tension so it can be released. This story does something else. It allows closeness to exist without release, connection without final touch. Historians studying devotional traditions note that this refusal of resolution is unusual, and it is also what gives the bond its lasting calm. Radha does not imagine scenes of return. She does not picture what might have been. Her attention stays with what is real. The bond remains present, but it does not demand her imagination. It does not ask her to hold two worlds at once. Krishna, moving farther into wider responsibilities, carries the same quiet understanding. He does not look back expecting to return things to how they were. He does not see the bond as unfinished business. It is complete in its own way, even without closure. This kind of love is difficult to name because it resists common shapes. It is not fulfilled, but it is not incomplete. It does not end, but it does not wait. It exists without asking the future to justify it. Radha's steadiness makes this possible. She does not measure love by outcome. She measures it by how calmly it can be carried. Because of this, she is not restless. She does not need reassurance. The bond rests within her without weight. The village continues its rhythm. People age, children grow, seasons change. Nothing circles back to correct what has shifted. Life accepts movement without needing explanation. This acceptance supports Radha's way of loving. It keeps her grounded. Historians often remind us that in pre-modern life, many relationships remained open-ended. Death, travel, duty, and change rarely allowed neat conclusions. People learned to live with what was unresolved. Radha's experience fits this reality. Her calm is not denial. It is adaptation without bitterness. The bond between her and Krishna becomes quieter over time, not weaker. It settles into something less visible, but more stable. It no longer depends on memory of touch or sound. It exists as trust, as alignment, as a shared understanding that does not need to be revisited. Radha does not carry regret. She does not feel that something was taken from her. She feels that something was lived fully, without needing to be held longer than it could be. This frees her from sorrow. Krishna, wherever he goes, does not carry guilt. He does not feel that his movement has broken something behind him. The bond does not accuse. It does not pull. It allows him to be whole where he is. This mutual ease with incompleteness is rare. It asks for patience, humility, and trust. It asks for the courage to let something remain as it is, without shaping it into a story that ends neatly. As time passes, the bond does not disappear into the past. It remains present, but it no longer asks for attention. It is part of who they are, not something they need to think about. Radha continues her life without waiting. Krishna continues his path without dividing himself. The lack of reunion does not create emptiness. It creates space. And in that space, something lasting takes form. A kind of love that does not need to close its hands, does not need to arrive anywhere, and does not fear being unfinished. The bond remains, quiet, complete in its own way, and strong enough to exist without ever needing to be resolved. Radha lives within this slow movement. Her days remain shaped by work, by people, by the land around her. She does not carry the past in a way that weighs her down. What she shared with Krishna has found its place. It is not something she revisits often, and it is not something she tries to forget. It simply exists, quietly. In many rural societies, memory works this way. What matters is not repeated constantly. It stays in the background, shaping how people act without demanding attention. Historians studying oral cultures often note that meaning was carried through habit and tone, rather than through retelling. Radha's life reflects this pattern. Krishna's presence is no longer part of her daily rhythm, but his absence does not feel sharp. It has become familiar, like a path no longer walked, but still known. She does not wonder where he is each day. She trusts that his path continues as it should. The village continues to change around her. Children grow taller. Older people move more slowly. Fields are planted, harvested, and planted again. Life does not pause to reflect on what has been. It moves forward, carrying everything with it. Radha's role in this life remains steady. She listens. She helps. She notices what others miss. Her calm becomes part of the village's balance. People turn to her without realizing why. She does not give advice often. Her presence is enough. This quiet influence is common in close communities. Not everyone leads by speaking or acting first. Some lead by holding the center steady. Anthropologists describe this as emotional grounding, a role that becomes clear only when it is absent. Radha fills this space naturally. The bond with Krishna does not interfere with this role. It does not pull her inward. It does not distract her. Instead, it deepens her patience. Having learned how to carry closeness without holding it, she moves through life with less urgency. Krishna, though distant, remains connected in a different way. News travels slowly, sometimes reaching the village, sometimes not. Radha does not depend on it. Knowing details wouldn't change what already exists between them. The bond does not need information to remain whole. Historians remind us that before written records were common, relationships often existed without updates or certainty. People trusted what had been built face to face. Radha's trust reflects this world. She does not ask absence to explain itself. As time passes, the bond becomes less personal and more universal. It no longer belongs only to two people. It begins to resemble a way of being, calm, open, ungrasping. Radha does not name this change, but she lives it. Others sense this shift without understanding it. Being near her feels easier. Conversations slow. Small conflicts lose their edge. Nothing is taught directly. It is learned through contact. This is how meaning spreads in quiet cultures. Not through instruction, but through example. Not through stories told loudly, but through lives lived consistently. The memory of Krishna does not fade, but it also does not dominate. It becomes part of Radha's inner landscape, shaping how she responds to change, to loss, to uncertainty. She has learned that closeness can remain even when it is not acted upon. As years move forward, this understanding settles deeper. Life continues to ask for attention, for effort, for care. Radha gives these freely. She does not feel that something is missing. She feels that something has already been given. The bond, now fully quiet, remains intact. It does not ask to return to what it was. It does not ask to become something else. It rests within the flow of life, unchanged by time, because it was never trying to stop time in the first place. And in that resting, something gentle takes shape, an example of love that does not cling, does not demand, and does not fade when it is no longer seen, but continues to live quietly within the rhythm of ordinary days. Over time, what Radha has lived begins to take on meaning beyond her own life, not because she sets out to explain it, but because others notice the way she carries herself. Her calm does not come from avoiding feeling. It comes from knowing how to live with it. People around her begin to sense that her steadiness is not just personality. It is a way of being. She listens without trying to fix. She stays present without pulling attention toward herself. When something changes, she adjusts without complaint. This quiet strength becomes noticeable precisely because it is not announced. In early communities, understanding often grew this way. Ideas did not begin as theories. They began as habits. Someone lived a certain way, and others felt the difference. Over time, that difference took on shape and meaning. Radha's love for Krishna slowly moves from experience into understanding, not in words, but in practice. She has learned that love does not need to be held to remain real. She has learned that distance does not cancel connection. These lessons were not chosen, they were lived. This way of loving begins to look like discipline, though it was never planned as one. It requires attention, patience, and trust. It asks for restraint without denial. It asks for openness without grasping. These qualities will later be named and studied, but here they exist without labels. Krishna's path continues outward, touching many lives. Wherever he goes, he carries a calm that feels familiar to those who meet him. He does not rush to claim loyalty. He does not force closeness. People feel drawn to him, not because he asks, but because he leaves space. This shared way of being, Radha's stillness and Krishna's openness, begins to form a pattern. It suggests that love can guide action without controlling it, and that devotion does not require possession. Historians studying the rise of devotional movements often note that such patterns appear before they are written down. First, people live them. Later, poets and thinkers try to explain what they have seen. Radha does not think of herself as an example. She does not imagine her life carrying meaning beyond itself. She continues to live simply, responding to what is near. Yet, the calm she embodies spreads quietly, because calm invites imitation. Others begin to carry longing with less fear. They learn that waiting does not have to feel empty. They see that closeness can remain even when paths separate. These insights do not come from instruction. They come from watching someone live them. Krishna's movement and Radha's stillness are not opposites. They support one another. One shows how to go without breaking connection. The other shows how to stay without turning waiting into loss. Together, they form a balance that feels complete. This balance becomes important as life continues to change. Communities grow, responsibilities widen, people leave and do not return. In such a world, love that demands constant presence would struggle. Love that allows space can survive. Radha's way of loving becomes a quiet answer to this reality. It does not deny pain, but it does not turn pain into identity. It allows life to move without turning every change into a wound. Krishna's role becomes clearer as well. He does not stay to keep love close. He moves so that love can expand. His leaving is not rejection. It is continuation in a different form. Slowly, without intention, their bond begins to look less like a personal story and more like a path others might follow. Not in detail, but in spirit. It shows a way of caring that does not close the hand, a way of staying connected without standing still. This is how meaning forms in lived tradition. First, there is life. Then, there is pattern. Only later do words arrive. Radha remains where she is, steady and present. Krishna continues outward, attentive and open. Neither tries to turn what they share into an explanation. Yet, the understanding is already there, quietly taking shape. That love can be a guide rather than a claim, a presence rather than a possession. And as this understanding settles, it prepares the ground for what comes next. Not as a story to be told, but as a way of seeing that will slowly find its voice in songs, reflections, and thought, long after the lives that shaped it have moved on. What Radha lives quietly begins to resemble something others recognize as devotion, not because she speaks about it, and not because she names it, but because her way of being feels steady and clear. She does not turn inward to escape the world. She stays fully present within it. Her love does not distract her from daily life. It sharpens her attention instead. She notices when someone is tired, when a task needs care, when silence is more helpful than words. This kind of awareness does not come from effort. It grows naturally when the mind is not crowded by fear or demand. In many early spiritual traditions, devotion was not first taught through rules. It was learned through watching how someone lived. Historians studying early Bhakti movements often note that practice came before philosophy. People felt something was different long before they knew how to explain it. Radha's love becomes this kind of practice. She does not withdraw from the world to protect her feeling. She allows life to continue shaping her. This is what makes her devotion strong. It does not depend on ideal conditions. It works within change. She does not try to keep Krishna close in memory. She does not repeat his name to comfort herself. She trusts what has already been formed. This trust frees her from needing constant reassurance. It gives her space to care for what is in front of her. Krishna, moving through wider responsibilities, carries the same approach. He does not demand devotion from others. He does not create dependence. People respond to him because they feel seen, not because they are asked to follow. His openness invites closeness without pressure. Together, even at a distance, they show a different shape of devotion. It is not built on fear of loss. It is not driven by reward. It grows from alignment, doing what needs to be done without forgetting what matters. This way of loving begins to feel disciplined, even though it was never designed to be. It requires patience, honesty, and restraint. It asks a person to stay open without reaching out to control outcomes. Over time, this becomes a kind of inner training. Radha does not think of herself as devoted in any special way. She is simply living according to what feels right and balanced. Yet, this balance becomes noticeable because it is rare. Many people struggle to love without holding on. They struggle to let life move without feeling left behind. Seeing Radha live differently makes others pause. They begin to wonder if closeness always needs to be claimed, if waiting always needs to hurt. These questions do not come with answers yet. They come as quiet reflections. Krishna's movement supports these reflections. He does not return to explain himself. He does not settle to prove anything. His absence gives shape to the lesson. It shows that devotion does not require constant presence to remain real. Historians later looking back will describe this as Bhakti, a path of devotion rooted in feeling rather than ritual. But here, it is not a path. It is simply life, lived with care and trust. Radha continues to serve, to listen, to notice. Her devotion is not directed only toward Krishna. It flows outward, touching work, people, and moments without hierarchy. This keeps it from becoming narrow. Krishna continues to move, responding to the needs he encounters. His devotion is not expressed through staying, but through attention. He gives himself fully to what is near, without cutting himself off from what is distant. This balance between staying and moving, between holding and releasing, begins to feel complete. It does not need explanation. It does not seek recognition. And in this quiet completeness, devotion settles into a simple truth. Love does not have to be dramatic to be deep, and commitment does not need to be visible to be strong. What Radha and Krishna live now is not a story with events. It is a way of being that slowly shapes how others understand love, care, and connection, without announcing itself and without asking to be followed. There is no moment when marriage is discussed between Radha and Krishna. No plans are made. No future is shaped around shared ownership of life. This absence is not treated as a problem, and it is not explained away. It simply remains part of how their bond exists. In the world around them, marriage carries clear meaning. It ties families together. It defines roles, duties, and responsibilities. In early societies, it is not only a personal union, but a social structure meant to bring order and continuity. Most relationships are understood through this frame. Radha and Krishna's bond does not move in that direction, not because they reject marriage, and not because they oppose custom, but because their connection is not trying to become a structure. It does not aim to settle into a form that can be managed or defined. Radha does not wait for a different ending. She does not feel unfinished because the bond does not lead there. Her life already has shape and purpose. Marriage is one path among many, not a requirement for meaning. Krishna does not avoid commitment. His life is filled with responsibility, movement, and care for others. The absence of marriage here is not an absence of seriousness. It is an absence of possession. Historians later reflecting on this relationship often point to this choice, intentional or not, as one of its most important features. In a culture where relationships were closely tied to duty and lineage, a bond that exists outside marriage stands out quietly. This does not mean the bond is secret or hidden. It exists openly within the community, without shame and without display. People sense it without needing it to be explained. Its calm makes it easier to accept. Radha's devotion does not depend on social recognition. She does not need a role to legitimize what she feels. Her sense of self remains intact without being defined through union. This gives her freedom without isolation. Krishna's devotion does not require settling. His path continues to widen. His responsibilities move beyond one place, one household, one set of ties. Marriage would have anchored him. The bond with Radha allows him to move without breaking connection. This arrangement feels natural because neither tries to turn love into claim. Marriage often involves shared possession of home, of future, of name. Radha and Krishna's bond avoids this without rejecting its value for others. It simply follows a different logic. Later thinkers will see this as symbolic. They will say the soul does not own the divine, and the divine does not bind the soul. But here, there is no symbol yet. There is only lived experience. Radha does not feel denied. Krishna does not feel free at her expense. Both remain whole. This wholeness is what gives the bond its calm. In early communities, not all meaningful relationships were formalized. Friendships, mentorships, and devotional ties often carried deep significance without legal or ritual recognition. Radha and Krishna's bond fits into this wider human reality. Because it is not closed by marriage, the relationship remains open. It can change shape without breaking. It can endure distance without needing to be redefined. It does not demand permanence to feel real. Radha continues to live fully within her community. Krishna continues to move through his expanding path. Neither life is paused or rearranged around what they share. This balance keeps the bond from becoming fragile. The absence of marriage does not make the bond less serious. It makes it lighter. It removes expectation. It allows love to exist without pressure. This lightness becomes part of why the story lasts. Love that insists on form can become rigid. Love that remains open can be carried forward in many ways. Radha and Krishna do not choose this arrangement as an idea. They live it because it fits who they are and what life asks of them. The meaning will come later. For now, the bond continues as it always has, unclaimed, unsealed, and strong enough to exist without needing to be named or completed. And in that quiet strength, the absence of marriage becomes not a lack, but a space, one that allows love to remain free, steady, and untouched by the need to settle into a final shape. As time passes, the bond between Radha and Krishna begins to look different, depending on where it is seen. In Braj, it remains quiet and familiar. Elsewhere, it starts to take on new shapes, shaped by local memory, language, and custom. This is how stories travel when they are not written down first. They move with people. Different regions begin to hold the bond in their own way. In some places, Krishna is remembered more clearly as a wandering figure, moving between villages and courts, carrying responsibility that reaches far beyond pastoral life. In others, the memory stays closer to the fields and forests, grounded in daily work and shared silence. Both memories feel true, because both reflect parts of what was lived. Radha's presence shifts as well. In some regions, she is central, named, and clearly defined. In others, she remains implied rather than described, felt more than spoken. This difference does not weaken her role. It shows how meaning can remain, even when form changes. Historians studying oral traditions note that variation is not a flaw. It is a sign that a story is alive. Fixed versions belong to writing. Living traditions adapt as they move, keeping what matters and releasing what does not. In Bengal, songs begin to focus more closely on Radha's inner life, her patience, her restraint, her ability to love without holding on become clearer themes. In Odisha, temple traditions give more shape to shared devotion, balancing Radha's stillness with Krishna's movement. In Braj itself, memory remains close to land and rhythm, resisting dramatic retelling. These differences do not compete. They sit beside one another. Each region hears the bond through its own needs and experiences, where life feels unstable. The calm of Radha's waiting becomes important. Where responsibility feels heavy, Krishna's movement without guilt offers relief. What remains constant is the absence of force. No version turns the bond into conquest, tragedy, or possession. Even when emotion is described more strongly, it does not cross into control. Love remains something carried, not something taken. Radha is not turned into a figure of sorrow. Krishna is not turned into a hero who abandons. The balance holds, even as details shift. This balance is what allows the bond to survive change without losing its center. People do not argue about which version is correct. They sing, listen, and live with the version that speaks to them. This flexibility keeps devotion close to daily life rather than turning it into doctrine. Over time, the bond becomes less tied to specific moments and more tied to feeling. People recognize it, not by events, but by tone, calm, trust, space. These qualities remain, even when names and settings change. Radha and Krishna themselves do not shape these variations. They do not guide how they are remembered. The bond moves on its own, carried by memory rather than intention. This way of spreading meaning is slow and gentle. It does not arrive as instruction. It arrives as recognition. Someone hears a song and feels that it matches something they already know. Someone watches how another waits or moves and feels less alone in doing the same. The bond becomes a shared language for understanding distance, patience, and care. It gives people a way to talk about love without turning it into ownership. This usefulness helps it last. Radha remains steady in every version. Krishna remains open and moving. Even when details differ, these roles do not change. They anchor the story as it travels. As the years go on, the bond no longer belongs to one place. It belongs wherever people understand what it means to care without clinging. It fits into many lives because it does not demand to be copied exactly. This adaptability keeps the bond from hardening. It stays close to human experience, changing shape as needed without losing its calm center. And in this way, the quiet love that once moved through fields and villages begins to move through regions and generations, not as a fixed story, but as a shared understanding, one that continues to find its place wherever people learn how to let love remain open. As the bond travels farther, people begin to give it form through images, not to explain it, but to sit with it. Paintings, carvings, and simple drawings start to appear, offering a quiet way to hold what cannot be fixed in words. Early images are modest. Krishna is shown with a flute, often standing slightly apart. Radha appears nearby, not reaching for him, not turned away. The space between them is clear. Artists do not try to fill it. That space is part of what they are showing. In many places, these images appear in everyday settings: small shrines, temple walls, painted manuscripts meant to be handled and seen up close. They are not grand displays. They are meant to be lived with. People look at them slowly, often while passing by, not stopping long enough to turn the moment into an event. Historians studying devotional art note that early images often focused on mood rather than action. What mattered was not what the figures were doing, but how they were positioned. A slight turn of the head, a calm posture, a shared direction of gaze. These details carried meaning without explanation. Radha is rarely shown as dramatic. She stands or sits with ease, her body relaxed, her attention open. Krishna is often shown in motion, but not rushing. Even when he moves, his posture remains calm. The images reflect what people already understand about them. Color and setting vary by region. In some places, the land is lush and green. In others, it is quieter, more open. These choices reflect local landscapes and daily experience. Artists paint what feels familiar. The bond fits easily into these surroundings because it does not depend on one specific place. The space between Radha and Krishna remains important across versions. It is never treated as absence. It is shown as breathing room. Viewers understand this without being told. The distance does not weaken the connection. It defines it. These images do not try to capture a single moment. They suggest continuity. There is no clear beginning or end. This suits the bond well. It is not a scene to be frozen. It is a way of relating that continues beyond the frame. People respond to these images quietly. They do not expect answers from them. They expect recognition. Someone looks and feels less pressure to hold on. Someone else feels allowed to wait without feeling left behind. The image does its work without instruction. Over time, styles change. Lines become softer or sharper. Details increase or fall away. But the tone remains steady. Radha is calm. Krishna is open. The space between them stays clear. This consistency matters. It keeps the bond from being turned into drama. Even when emotion is shown, it is not overwhelming. The images resist urgency. They allow the viewer to slow down. Art becomes another way the bond lives alongside people, not as decoration, but as presence. It sits in rooms, along paths, in places where life happens. People see it while moving, not while stopping everything else. Historians often point out that art in devotional cultures was not separate from daily life. It was part of it. These images follow that pattern. They do not demand attention. They receive it gently. Radha and Krishna, as figures in art, do not claim the viewer. They offer space. This makes the images easy to return to. Nothing in them feels finished or closed. As generations pass, people continue to paint, carve, and imagine them, not to improve the story, but to keep company with it. Each image adds another quiet layer without replacing what came before. And in this growing collection of simple, steady forms, the bond finds another way to remain close. Visible without being fixed. Present without being pressed into meaning. Continuing to teach through calm rather than display. Time does not move the same way in this story as it does in daily life. Days pass, seasons change, and years move forward. But the bond between Radha and Krishna does not belong to a single moment that can be placed on a clear timeline. It exists alongside time, not inside it. For people living in early societies, this way of understanding time was familiar. Life followed cycles rather than straight lines. Planting returned each year. Work repeated. Loss and return were expected. Historians studying ancient Indian thought often note that time was felt as something that turned and folded, not something that moved away and disappeared. Krishna's life begins to be seen through this wider sense of time. He is remembered not only as someone who lived in a certain place, but as someone who appears whenever balance is needed. His movement across regions and roles makes him hard to fix in one era. He belongs to history, but also to repetition. Radha's place in this shifting sense of time is different. She remains steady. She does not travel. She does not change roles. Her presence becomes a point of rest within movement. While Krishna moves through cycles, Radha holds still within them. This contrast shapes how people understand their bond. Krishna represents motion, change, and responsibility that returns again and again. Radha represents continuity, patience, and care that does not need to move to remain alive. Together, they show how time can be lived without being rushed. In stories told later, events are sometimes arranged into sequence. Births, departures, returns are placed in order. But beneath these arrangements, the bond resists being pinned down. It feels as if it could be happening now, or long ago, or always. This timeless quality makes the bond easy to carry forward. People do not need to imagine a distant past to understand it. They recognize it in their own experience. When someone leaves, when waiting becomes part of love, when closeness continues without contact. Historians and thinkers later debate whether Krishna belongs to a specific historical period or to many layers of tradition. Some place him in ancient dynastic time. Others see him as a figure shaped by centuries of retelling. Radha's later appearance in texts adds to this sense of layered time. What matters for those who live with the story is not resolving these questions. It is the feeling that the bond does not expire. It remains useful. It remains familiar. It fits into different moments without losing meaning. Radha does not age in the way other figures do. She does not move toward an ending. She remains present, holding space for what continues. Krishna's movement never feels like disappearance because the bond is not tied to his location. This way of holding time reflects a deeper understanding of change. Some things move, some things remain. Life needs both. Without movement, nothing grows. Without steadiness, nothing holds. The bond becomes a quiet example of this balance. It shows that love can live across time without needing to stay in one shape. It can change form without losing its center. As generations pass, people tell and retell the story, sometimes adding detail, sometimes removing it. Each telling belongs to its moment. None cancels the others. Time layers the story rather than replacing it. This layered time allows the bond to remain close. It is not locked into the past. It does not wait for the future. It lives wherever people understand what it means to let someone move without leaving them behind. Radha's calm and Krishna's movement continue to meet in this shared space. Neither needs to win over time. They simply live alongside it. And in doing so, the bond steps out of ordinary history and into lived time. A time that does not rush forward, does not close behind, but remains open enough for love to stay present, no matter how far the days move on. As the bond spreads and settles into many places, it begins to offer something people need when life feels uncertain. The world does not stay calm for long. Kingdoms change, leaders rise and fall, work becomes harder, and safety feels less steady than before. In moments like these, people often look for something that does not shift as quickly as everything else. The bond between Radha and Krishna offers that steadiness without pretending that change will stop. It does not promise escape from hardship. It shows how to live while hardship is happening. Historians have often noticed that quiet forms of devotion grow stronger during times of political and social change. When structures feel fragile, people turn inward, not to hide, but to regain balance. In these moments, loud answers feel less helpful than calm presence. Radha's way of loving speaks clearly here. She does not fight change, and she does not give up under its weight. She continues to live, to care, and to stay present. Her calm becomes an example of how to remain human when certainty is gone. Krishna's path offers a different but matching lesson. He does not stop moving when responsibility grows. He does not cling to what feels safe or familiar. He goes where he is needed, carrying steadiness with him rather than leaving it behind. This shows that action does not have to destroy calm, and that movement does not require emotional separation. Together, Radha and Krishna show that love can support both staying and going without turning either into loss. People begin to turn to this bond, not for clear answers, but for reassurance. It reminds them that distance does not always mean abandonment, that change does not erase connection, and that waiting does not have to feel empty. In daily life, this understanding becomes practical. When someone leaves for work, duty, or uncertainty, the bond offers a way to let them go without fear. When someone remains behind, it offers a way to stay whole without resentment. The bond does not promise reward or reunion. It does not guarantee that things will return to how they were. Instead, it shows that care can remain even when outcomes are unknown. This honesty is what makes it trustworthy. Radha is not remembered as someone protected from difficulty, but as someone who met it without closing herself off. Krishna is not remembered as someone who avoided responsibility, but as someone who carried it without losing gentleness. Over time, devotion shaped by this bond becomes less about ritual and more about inner posture. It is about how one waits, how one moves, and how one allows others to move. These quiet choices begin to matter more than outward display. Historians later describe this as finding refuge within, not by turning away from the world, but by standing more steadily inside it. The bond continues to spread quietly through songs, habits, images, and tone. It does not demand attention. It does not rise up as protest or argument. In peaceful times, it feels gentle. In difficult times, it feels strong. It adapts without losing its center. Radha remains the example of how to stay. Krishna remains the example of how to go. Neither path is treated as better than the other. In a world that often forces people to choose between holding on and moving forward, this bond offers another way. It shows that one can care deeply, allow change, and remain whole at the same time. That quiet lesson is why the bond continues to endure, not as an escape from life, but as steady support for those trying to live within it. As time passes, people begin to wonder where this bond truly comes from, not in a distant or academic way, but in a quiet human way. They feel the meaning of the bond, live by it, and only later begin to ask how it first took shape. This order matters. Experience comes first. Explanation comes later. Krishna appears early in many traditions. His name is found in old texts, songs, and stories that were passed down long before they were written. He is remembered as a child, a guide, a mover of events, someone who belongs both to the village and to the wider world. Historians see layers here, older pastoral memories mixed with later philosophical thought. Krishna grows as the tradition grows. Radha's presence is different. She does not appear clearly in the earliest texts. Her name is absent from many early writings, even when the emotional world she represents is already there. This absence has led scholars to think that Radha lived first in oral memory, not in written record. She existed in songs, in feeling, in the way people understood love and waiting, long before she was named. In many cultures, this is how important figures begin. What is felt deeply does not always enter writing right away. Writing often comes later, when people try to preserve what they fear might be lost. Radha's late arrival in texts does not weaken her role. It suggests how central she already was in lived devotion. When Radha does appear clearly in writing, she arrives fully formed. She is not explained slowly. She is already understood. This tells us that people knew her long before they wrote her down. The text follows life, not the other way around. Historians continue to discuss how and when Radha became part of Krishna's story in written form. Some see her as a symbol shaped by poets. Others see her as the voice of women's devotion finally entering record. These views differ, but they agree on one thing. Radha reflects something that was already real to the people who lived with the bond. What matters most is not solving this question, but noticing its shape. The bond did not begin as literature. It began as lived experience. Only after generations carried it did words arrive to hold it in place. This explains why the bond feels so natural. It was not designed. It was remembered. It was shaped by daily life, by separation, by care, by patience. Writing did not create it. Writing tried to catch up with it. As people begin to speak about origins, they do so gently. They do not argue loudly. They continue to sing, to tell stories, to live by what the bond teaches. Questions about history exist alongside devotion, not in conflict with it. The bond remains open enough to hold both feeling and inquiry. It allows space for mystery without anxiety. Not everything needs to be pinned down for meaning to remain. And so, even as people begin to ask where the story came from, the story itself stays calm. It does not rush to explain itself. It remains what it has always been. A quiet understanding carried forward by those who found it useful long before they tried to define it. When Radha finally takes a clear place in written poetry, it does not feel like an invention. It feels like recognition. The words arrive late, but the feeling they describe is already familiar. People read or hear these poems and sense that something long understood has finally been given a name. One text becomes especially important in this moment, written centuries after the bond had already lived in songs and memory. It brings Radha to the center without trying to justify her presence. She is not introduced carefully. She is already there, already known. The writing does not explain why she matters. It assumes that the reader understands. This matters because it shows how writing follows devotion, not the other way around. The poet is not creating a new idea. He is listening to what people already carry and shaping it into form. The language gives voice to feelings that have been lived quietly for generations. In these poems, Radha's inner life becomes clear. Her patience, her restraint, her depth of feeling are described simply, without turning her into a figure of excess. She is not praised for suffering. She is understood for staying whole. This keeps the bond from becoming tragic. Krishna, in these verses, remains moving and distant, yet never careless. His leaving is not cruelty. It is part of his nature. The writing does not soften this. It accepts it. In doing so, it stays honest to what people already know about the bond. What is new is not the feeling, but the clarity. The poems allow people to sit with the bond more closely. They give shape to what was once carried only in tone and habit. Yet even here, nothing is closed. The writing leaves space. It does not settle the bond into a final meaning. People respond to these poems not as instruction, but as companionship. They hear their own waiting reflected. They recognize their own balance between care and restraint. The text becomes something to return to, not something to master. Historians later describe this moment as a turning point when Radha becomes fully visible in literature. But for those living at the time, it feels less like a beginning and more like a quiet arrival. Something known has stepped into view. The bond remains calm, even as it enters writing. It does not grow louder. It does not become more demanding. The words carry the same restraint that shaped the lived experience. This consistency is what allows the bond to move from life into literature without losing its center. Radha is now named, but she is not confined. Krishna is described, but he is not captured. The space between them remains. Writing does not close it. It respects it. This respect is why the bond survives the move into text. Many stories harden when they are written down. This one stays open. It continues to breathe. As these poems spread, people do not stop living the bond as they always have. They simply find new language that sits alongside their experience. Life and text remain connected, not competing. And so, with Radha fully present in writing at last, the bond takes another step forward, not toward completion, but toward shared understanding, carried gently by words that know how to leave space for what cannot be held. As the bond settles into writing and song, it also takes shape in places people can visit. Temples begin to appear where Radha and Krishna are remembered together. These spaces are not meant to explain the bond. They are meant to hold it quietly. Early temples are simple. Stone, earth, and open space matter more than decoration. People come and go without ceremony. Some pause. Some sit for a while. Some pass through without stopping. The space does not demand anything from them. It offers room. Historians studying early temple sites note that these places often grew slowly. A small shrine might stand for years before walls were added. Images changed over time. Nothing arrived fully formed. Devotion shaped the space, not the other way around. Radha and Krishna are shown together, but not touching. The space between them remains clear. Stone carvers do not close it. They leave it as part of the image. This choice is not accidental. It reflects what people already understand about the bond. Visitors do not come to these temples looking for answers. They come to sit with a feeling they already know. The quiet of the space helps them slow down. The presence of Radha and Krishna reminds them that love does not have to be loud to be strong. In some regions, Krishna is shown slightly forward, as if in motion. Radha stands nearby, steady and calm. In others, they face the same direction, looking outward together. The details change, but the tone stays the same. These temples become part of daily life. People stop by before work or on the way home. They bring nothing special. They do not stay long. The bond fits easily into routine, just as it always has. Archaeological remains show how these places were repaired, rebuilt, and adapted over centuries. Stones were replaced, walls shifted. The devotion remained. This slow care shows how deeply the bond was woven into ordinary life. Radha is not treated as secondary in these spaces. She stands as equal presence, not as background. This matters. It reflects how people experience the bond, not as hierarchy, but as balance. Krishna's movement and Radha's stillness are held together in these images. One does not overpower the other. Visitors sense this without explanation. They feel allowed to be both active and calm within the same life. These spaces do not turn devotion into spectacle. They remain quiet. They remain open. People leave feeling settled rather than stirred. As time passes, temples rise and fall, but the bond they hold stays familiar. It does not need to be defended or explained. It rests in stone the same way it rests in memory. And in these quiet places, the bond finds another way to stay close to people, not through story or song alone, but through simple presence, offering a place where care, distance, and calm can exist together without conflict. As the bond continues to live in temples, songs, and daily habit, people begin to understand why it lasts. Not because it promises happiness, and not because it offers escape, but because it asks very little and gives a lot. The bond between Radha and Krishna does not depend on victory, reunion, or resolution. It does not rise through conflict or fall through tragedy. It stays quiet. Because of that, it survives changes that would break louder stories. When kingdoms collapse or traditions shift, this bond remains useful. Historians often notice that stories endure when they match real human experience. Most lives do not reach clear endings. People leave, situations change, feelings remain without closure. The bond reflects this truth. It does not try to fix what life leaves open. Radha's way of loving lasts because it does not exhaust her. She does not pour herself out in waiting. She continues to live, to care, to notice others. Love becomes part of her strength rather than something that drains it. This makes her example easy to carry forward. Krishna's way of moving lasts for the same reason. He does not cut ties to move ahead. He carries connection with him without being weighed down by it. This allows him to act, to serve, to respond to what is needed without becoming divided. Together, they show a form of love that does not collapse under distance. It stretches without tearing. It allows people to imagine caring deeply without needing to control outcomes. This imagination matters in everyday life. People recognize themselves in this bond. They see their own waiting, their own letting go, their own need to stay steady while life moves. The bond does not judge these experiences. It holds them because it does not ask to be believed in a certain way. It travels easily across time and place. People do not need special knowledge to understand it. They only need to have lived. The bond also avoids turning suffering into virtue. Radha is not praised for pain. Krishna is not excused for leaving. The story does not reward endurance with reunion. It respects endurance for what it is. This honesty gives the bond trust. It does not promise what it cannot give. It offers calm, not certainty. For many people, that is enough. Over generations, the bond continues to be shared quietly. Parents pass it to children through tone and habit rather than explanation. Songs are sung not to teach, but to remember a feeling. Even as new ideas and beliefs arise, the bond does not compete. It fits alongside them. It does not demand loyalty. It offers understanding. Radha remains the example of how to stay without closing in. Krishna remains the example of how to go without leaving behind. These roles remain clear because they are simple. And because they are simple, they last. They do not depend on changing circumstances. They do not need to be updated. The bond endures not as a lesson carved in stone, but as a quiet companion to life, something people carry with them when they need to remember that love can remain gentle, even when nothing else does. In the present day, the bond between Radha and Krishna is still part of daily life for many people. It appears in small ways, not always noticed. A short visit to a temple, a song played softly in the morning, a name spoken with care. These moments do not interrupt life. They sit inside it. People do not approach this bond as something distant or ancient. It feels close because it speaks to experiences that have not changed. Someone leaves for work far away. Someone waits without knowing when things will settle. Someone learns how to care without being able to decide the outcome. The bond fits these moments easily. Rituals connected to Radha and Krishna are often simple: lighting a lamp, offering flowers, standing quietly for a few minutes. There is no pressure to do more. Devotion here is not about doing things correctly. It is about being present. In places where people gather regularly, the bond becomes part of routine. It is woven into the rhythm of days rather than reserved for special occasions. This keeps it grounded. It remains something lived, not something performed. Pilgrimage sites connected to Radha and Krishna continue to draw visitors, but not always for dramatic reasons. Many people come just to sit, to slow down, or to feel settled. The places themselves are not loud. They allow quiet. Historians note that traditions last when they adapt without losing their center. The bond does this well. It does not resist modern life. It moves alongside it. People carry its calm into busy routines, crowded cities, and uncertain futures. Radha's example remains clear. She shows how to stay steady when life does not offer answers. Krishna's example remains clear as well. He shows how to move forward without cutting oneself off from care. These examples still feel useful. The bond does not require people to withdraw from the world. It encourages them to live fully within it, without letting fear or attachment take control. This balance keeps it relevant. Parents share the bond with children, not through lectures, but through tone, through patience, through how they let others go without anger. The bond passes quietly from one generation to the next. Even for those who do not think of themselves as devoted, the bond still speaks. It does not require belief to be understood. It reflects something familiar. The need to remain kind and steady when life does not slow down. In this way, the bond continues to live, not as a story frozen in the past, but as a presence moving through ordinary days. It remains close because it never tried to rise above life. Radha and Krishna are still remembered, not because people need them to solve problems, but because they help people stay balanced while problems exist. And so, in the middle of modern life, with all its speed, noise, and uncertainty, the bond remains what it has always been, a quiet guide, reminding people that love can remain calm, even when the world around it does not. At the end, what remains is not a story about loss or waiting, but a quiet praise of love itself. Not the kind of love that holds tightly or demands certainty, but the kind that trusts, allows, and stays gentle even when life does not explain itself. The bond between Radha and Krishna shows that love does not need to conquer anything to be meaningful. It only needs to remain honest. This love is deeply human. It understands fear, distance, and uncertainty because it lives among them. Radha does not become smaller because she lets go. She becomes fuller. Krishna does not become distant because he moves on. He becomes more present to the world he serves. Together, they show that love can grow without possession, and devotion can deepen without control. There is faith here, but it is not loud. It does not ask to be proven. It does not threaten or divide. It rests on trust. Trust that what is real does not disappear just because it is not held. This is the kind of faith that feels close to everyday life because it asks for balance, patience, and care rather than certainty. Radha's love teaches that waiting does not have to hurt and that stillness can be strong. Krishna's path teaches that moving forward does not mean leaving love behind. These lessons do not belong only to temples or texts. They belong to anyone who has learned how to care deeply while allowing life to change. In this way, their bond becomes more than memory. It becomes guidance. It offers a way to live with an open heart in a world that often feels unsure. It shows that love can be an act of faith, not faith that demands reward, but faith that trusts goodness to remain, even when outcomes are unknown. This is why the bond endures. It speaks softly to something shared by all people, the wish to love without fear, to let go without bitterness, and to stay kind without losing oneself. It does not promise peace by escaping life. It offers peace by meeting life as it is. As the story settles, there is nothing left to resolve. The bond does not close, it rests. It leaves behind a feeling rather than a conclusion, a sense that love, when it is patient and free, becomes a quiet form of devotion. And in that calm space, where care and faith meet without force, the beauty of love remains, human, gentle, and deeply meaningful, carrying a soft spiritual light that does not fade when the world grows dark, but continues to glow quietly, enough to guide the heart toward rest